Fast and the Furious, 2004. Brian Spillner appears to be a simple but fun dude, a connoisseur of cars and tuna sandwiches. He's got an eye for Mia Toretto, the gorgeous sister of Dominic Toretto. Dom is the alpha male of an ultra-cool group of car modders and street racers, including Dom's main gal Letty, the hot-headed Vincent, and the obsessive Jesse. They're a family. This streetwise troupe doesn't like Brian in the slightest, but he's eager to earn their respect. So eager that he wagers his Mitsubishi Eclipse against Dom in an illegal quarter-mile LA street race. But the dope activates his nitrous oxide boost far too early in the race, resulting in his car nearly falling apart. Brian foolishly thinks he almost had Dom, but really, he never even had his car. Just as Brian loses his ride and his chance for respect, cops suddenly burst onto the scene to bust up the party. Everyone splits. Toretto is easily the most infamous of the racers, and an officer spots him as he flees on foot. Fortunately, Brian shows up, scoops up Dom, and evades the cops through an insanely dangerous street chase. They seem to be in the clear when Johnny Tran and his crew intercept the duo. Turns out Dom doesn't belong on Tran's turf, so Tran's guys completely destroy Brian's, well, Dom's car. Ah well, it's just a car. But now Brian still owes Dom a new one. Brian finally earns Dom's respect and becomes part of the family. But why does Brian care so much anyway? Is it really all about Mia? Well, no. It turns out Brian is actually an undercover officer sent to infiltrate the street racing scene. See, a gang of racers has been robbing truckers on the highway, stealing millions of dollars worth of DVD players. Wait, DVD players? Oh yeah, that's right, 2001. While spying on Johnny Tran torturing his fencer with oil, Brian notices a lot of electronics in Tran's garage. So he greenlights a raid on Johnny Tran's house, which will disgrace the young racer in front of his father. Well, turns out the electronics were all legal. They have the wrong guy. So the cops pressure Brian to incriminate Toretto, as all evidence points to his team as the hijackers. Brian's reluctant though. It's his family now after all. The gang heads to Race Wars, a huge racing event in the desert where Brian can win the 10-second car he still owes Dom. Jesse loses his father's car to Johnny Tran, but instead of paying up, he bails. So Tran calls Dom out for the raid, a fight breaks out, Dom storms off, and Jesse finally connects all the dots and realizes that they're off to hit a truck. But the truckers aren't playing around anymore. It turns out all it takes to take down the whole Fast and Furious gang is a trucker with a shotgun. Vince is left dangling from the truck, ready to get blasted to Kingdom Come at any moment. All the cars are taken out when suddenly Brian comes in to save the day. Vince gets airlifted to safety, but in the process, Brian completely blows his cover to everyone. Dom isn't trying to run from an arrest, but he still has to save little Jesse, who Tran is still after. Brian, Dom, Jesse, and Mia all converge at the Toretto house a moment too late, as Tran's gang guns down Jesse in a drive-by. But they shouldn't have messed with family, as Brian and Dom systematically eliminate all the shooters. Before Dom finally surrenders, he and Brian decide to have one final 10-second race. They narrowly beat a crossing train before Dom completely totals his father's Dodge Charger RT. But Brian still owes him a 10-second car, so he gives Dom the keys to his car and lets the criminal escape into the sunset. Too Fast, Too Furious, Turbocharged Prelude, 2004. So Brian's loyalty to Dom kinda breaks a few dozen laws. He quickly goes from cop to fugitive, forced to leave Los Angeles and head east, earning ridiculous sums from street racing. He purchases a Nissan Skyline before eventually ending up on the sunny streets of Miami. Too Fast, Too Furious, 2004. Brian quickly makes a name for himself on the street racing scene of Miami, but sure enough, his old FBI buddy, Bilkins, picks him out. The FBI is willing to clear Brian's name, but for a price. They need a talented driver to infiltrate the network of Miami drug lord and Matthew McConaughey wannabe, Carter Verone. They already have Monica Fuentes infiltrating his mansion, and his heart, so they know that he's looking for two new drug money transporters. Brian only agrees to help if he can choose his partner, his childhood friend, the hot-headed, big-mouthed Roman Pierce. Roman doesn't trust Brian in the slightest. He found out his best friend was a cop right around the time he was arrested, but Roman agrees to help in exchange for ending his parole. The two, quote-unquote, audition for Verone, beating out other Miami driving teams to an impound lot a dozen miles away. The movie turns into Matrix Reloaded for a bit, endangering countless lives on the highway as they successfully complete the craziest job interview imaginable. Brian and Rome soon learn that their new boss isn't exactly the chillest dude to work for. He tortures a police detective with a rat, a blowtorch, and a bucket. Damn, PG-13 movies really have to get creative with their torture scenes. Verone is persuading the detective to distract the police force long enough for Roman and Brian to transport the money through the city. But during the transport, the detective unleashes the full police force on our duo. Another epic chase ensues, but not even a charged ESD hook can slow down the racers. Eventually, the cops surround Brian and Rome in a warehouse. But when the doors open, hundreds of cars spill out, completely camouflaging the heroes as they escape. When police finally do track down the cars they're looking for, they find them being driven by Brian's close friend Suki and Tej Parker. Brian and Rome make a clean getaway with the money. The movie turns into Goldfinger for a moment as Rome suddenly ejects Verone's henchman from the vehicle. Before Brian gets the same luxury, he learns that Verone is calling an audible on the rendezvous. They were supposed to meet at an airstrip, and the FBI is waiting for them there. But now, Brian and Roman have to meet Verone at his private boat. Brian is basically screwed. He's clearly all set up to be executed. To make matters worse, Monica Fuentes' cover has been blown and her fate looks even grimmer. Rome saves Brian, but there's no time to celebrate. They drive alongside Verone's luxurious boat, eventually Dukes of Hazzarding a ramp. The car friggin' flies into the boat, and Verone is quickly incapacitated. Roman and Brian decide to give all the money back to law enforcement. Well, almost all of it. Now they're ready to start new lives with clear names and open hearts. Los Bandoleros, 2009. Dom Toretto is relaxing with a new family in the Dominican Republic after 5 years of running crimes as a fugitive in Latin America. He's like a godfather in the community, providing for the impoverished citizens and acting as a must-see role model. The people are desperately struggling for oil, causing mass inflation. Han Lu, alias Han Solo, Dom's longtime crime partner, flies into town. Okay, so important note about Han. His character actually first appeared in 2003's Better Luck Tomorrow, directed by Jeremy Lin and portrayed by the same actor, Sung Kang. Both Lin and Kang consider Better Luck Tomorrow canon, but it's not officially a canon part of the Fast and Furious franchise. But check it out if you want all of Han's theoretical backstory. Anyway, Han and Dom break out Dom's friend Tego from a shoddy security prison before meeting with corrupt local politician Elvis. He tips them off about an oil truck primed for a hijacking that would really help out the citizens. Letty shows up in the DR, the first time Dom has seen her since LA. They make out on the beach for like half the short film and prepare for the upcoming epic heist. At some point during their time in the Caribbean, the two spontaneously get married, using a cross necklace as a ring. Fast and Furious, 2009. The heist is indeed epic. Letty uses some kind of freezing chemical and breaks the oil tanks loose. It's a rousing success, and the Robin Hoodian crime saves the community. But Han breaks the news that the police have raided their garage. Things are getting dangerous and hot, and Dom really cares about his family here in the DR, but he can't endanger his beloved Letty. So he decides to ghost her and head for Panama. Poor Letty heads back to LA where she runs into good old Brian Spillner, real name Brian O'Connor. He's a bona fide FBI agent now, so Letty agrees to work undercover for them as a cash runner for cartel drug lord Arturo Braga in exchange for Dom's freedom. Things are gonna go sour though, since Braga kills all of his drivers after a mission. It's just good business after all. Letty seemingly gets killed, and it's made to look like a car accident. When Dom hears about what happened, he rushes back to LA to play detective. He finds nitromethane at the scene of Letty's suspicious death, and tracks it down to David Park, an associate of Braga that Brian is also closely tracking. Brian and Dom both converge on Park. Dom dangles him out the window, but Brian saves his life. Both racers end up in Braga's version of a job interview, a city race, the winner becoming a new doomed heroin runner over the US-Mexican border. It's a tight contest, but Dom tackles Brian in the final stretch to claim victory. Brian is ticked, but thankfully, he has the resources of an FBI agent. He illegally raids the house of Braga runner and foot fetishist Dwight Mueller, planting a fat sack of drugs. Braga is short a driver, so Brian earns a spot on the team. Giselle Yashar, aka Wonder Woman, is working for Braga and instantly gets the hot for Dom, but he only has eyes for Letty. Nonetheless, she helps tip him off that danger may await them on the other side of the border. The movie turns into Mad Max for a bit as Braga's team ventures through complex underground tunnels, eluding border control to get to Mexico. Dom's tipped off to the danger, so he cranks up the nos and ignites his cigarette lighter. He confronts the muscle of Braga's operation, Phoenix, who openly gloats about personally assassinating Letty. The car bomb explodes, and Brian and Dom get away, riding off with a car full of millions of dollars full of heroin. With the ultimate bargaining chip, they meet with Braga in the flesh as part of an FBI sting. The FBI jumps the gun, falling for the obvious decoy as the real Braga, who's actually Campos, escapes to Mexico. In the struggle, Dom saves Wonder Woman, who completely turns sides and helps Brian and Dom track the drug lord to a rural, isolated church. They attempt to take Braga back to the States, but his goons ambush them and chase them through the tunnels. Phoenix has Brian cornered, but Brian holds him in place while Dom emerges through the tunnel and nails Phoenix with his car, avenging Letty. Dom is finally done running from law enforcement, but despite Brian's extremely well-written letter for clemency, he's still convicted and sentenced to several decades in prison. Brian and Mia sacrifice their freedom, racing off to illegally intercept the prison transport and liberate their friend. Fast 5, 2011. So that highway prison break causes one hell of a stir. The family members have since become some of the most wanted fugitives in the world. Brian and Mia eventually beat Dom to Rio, where they're welcomed by their old friend Vince. Vince is teamed up with local crime boss Hernan Reyes and has a plan to steal 3 luxury cars from a train. Vince promises that it'll be easy, so Mia and Brian are in. Dom arrives in time for the heist, but he's suspicious about the plan. For one, the train is crawling with DEA agents, and for two, Reyes' men seem to only be interested in one vehicle, a Ford GT40. Dom has Mia steal the special Ford and confronts Reyes' henchmen. The DEA agents try to interfere, but one of Reyes' goons kills them. Brian and Dom barely escape the train as the movie turns into Thelma and Louise for a bit. Reyes scoops them up though, ready to torture them to learn Mia's location. Too bad they're messing with an FBI agent and, Vin Diesel. Dom and Brian quickly break the restraints and rush back to Miss Toretto. It appears like Dom murdered those DEA agents, so the law enforcement puts their top man on the job, Luke Hobbs. Hobbs is beyond intimidating. He's crafty, smart, and handsome. He recruits recently widowed cop Elena Neves as a translator. Her husband's grisly murder, leading to her sense of justice, guarantees that she won't be corrupted. Meanwhile, the gang catches Vince stealing a computer chip from the GT40 and discover the location of Reyes' massive cash stockpile. 100 million split into 10 safe houses. Reyes' men and Hobbs both make a move on the safe house, with the gangsters arriving first. An epic chase through the favelas follow. At one point, Dom heroically saves Elena, but drops his iconic Letty Cross necklace in the process. After actually witnessing the behemoth Hobbs in action, Dom and Brio are more than ready to hightail it out of Rio. But Mia announces that she's got a bun in the oven. With a baby on the way, they make the responsible decision. One more giant heist for that cool 100 million. They recruit Han, Roman, Tej, Wonder Woman, and Dom's friends from the DR, Tego and Rico. I still can't figure out exactly who the Fast Five are. Anyway, instead of hitting all 10 houses, they decide to raid a single crime den and burn Reyes' money, forcing him to gather his cash into one safe central location, the local police vault. Hobbs finally catches up with his targets and makes an arrest. Well, after Dom nearly bludgeons him to death. But the movie turns into Black Hawk Down for a bit as Reyes attacks the extradition convoy, killing Vince and most of Hobbs' trusted squad. Well, Reyes messed with the wrong DSS agent, because Hobbs aligns himself with Dom and his crew to get revenge. The plan is simple. Simply blow a hole into the wall of the station and drag the vault out with their cars. Then, drag the giant steel box through the streets of Rio, slaughtering countless police on the way with a makeshift wrecking ball. During the chase, the gang use fake police cars to earn a 10-second window of invisibility, where they swap the vault for an empty duplicate. Things come to a head when Brian and Dom seem to be outnumbered on a bridge. Dom turns around to face them so Brian can escape and be a father, but Brian isn't going to abandon his family like that. Suddenly, the rest of Reyes' men get taken out as Hobbs heroically arrives to finish him off himself. As a sign of good faith, he gives Brian and Dom a 24-hour head start before the pursuit begins anew. Fast and Furious 6, 2013. With 11 million bucks each, the crew is living the good life all over the world. Dom even has a new squeeze, Super Cop Elena. She's had a soft spot for him ever since he broke into her house in the middle of the night to retrieve Letty's cross necklace. Why would he ever trade this life of luxury to go back to work? Well, Hobbs shows up with the answer. Turns out Letty is still alive. She was spotted causing a commotion in Berlin, working for super soldier turned mercenary Owen Shaw. This Shaw guy is public enemy number 1, and he's currently pursuing components for Nightshade, a device that can completely disable a military security grid. Hobbs is desperate for assistance, and even offers Dom's crew full amnesty in exchange. But once the team tracks into Russia, Shaw dupes them by luring police forces to another location while his people ransack Interpol headquarters. The movie turns into The Dark Knight for a bit as Shaw easily zips through the streets in his Batmobile. In the commotion, Dom spots Letty as one of Shaw's assisting drivers and corners her. Letty hesitates slightly, but ultimately shoots her husband in the shoulder. Turns out, she has an ever-convenient case of amnesia. She didn't actually get killed 4 years prior. She was left in a coma. Braga was always in Shaw's pocket, so when Shaw saw such a talented blank slate in Letty, he recruited her. This Braga connection is all the crew has to act on, so they sneak Brian into prison to interrogate Braga. Brian gets cornered in his cell, but everyone keeps forgetting that this man is more than a lead foot and pretty blue eyes. He dispatches all of them with ease, and gets some intel from Braga in probably the most believable torture scene in the entire series. Dom tracks Shaw to London, and then beats Letty in a street race. After that, they share a moment of sexy scar-exploring bonding, but she still remembers nothing. Shaw's next target is a convoy transporting the final Nightshade component, a microchip, to a NATO base in Spain. The gang thinks they have the mercenary cornered in the convoy, until he emerges in a friggin' tank. Again, an epic chase ensues, and Shaw dares Dom by forcing Letty to ride on top of the tank to remove an anchor. When she gets launched violently into the air, Dom crashes his car and leaps through the air to intercept her. He flies across the median, cushioning the blow on a windshield with his massive back muscles. Cool. Shaw's captured, but he's still in control as he's now holding Mia hostage. He continues to flex his deep connections, revealing he even has moles in the DSS, including Hobbs' partner, Riley. The bad guys waltz on out and make their way to the biggest jet ever. The movie turns into the beginning of Face Off for a bit as the whole crew chases it down the runway, attaching their cars to the wings to keep it from taking off. Mia gets rescued, Dom retrieves the chip, and Letty murders Riley before the jet explodes. The only casualty for the good guys is Wonder Woman, who sacrifices herself in the battle to save her lover, Han. With newfound amnesty, the family returns to the old Toretto household in LA to share a meal. Heartbroken, Han sets off to Tokyo. Furious 7, 2014. Unfortunately, it looks like Shaw was the wrong man to mess with, and there won't be a happily ever after. Owen's brother, Deckard Shaw, is a one-man army. He's pissed that his little brother has been left in critical condition, so he embarks on a revenge tour. Meanwhile, Dom is still trying to awaken Letty's still dormant memories by taking her to race wars. Brian and Hobbs are both getting restless with their more relaxed lifestyles after saving the world. But things get exciting for Hobbs when he finds Shaw acquiring the identities of Dom and the team on Hobbs' government computer. They fight, and Shaw shows just how dangerous he is by putting the Rock in the hospital, before heading to Japan to take out his first target. The Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift 2014. Han has been building a criminal empire in Japan. He's partnered with the local drift king Takeshi, the young nephew of a powerful yakuza. A teenage street racer, Sean Boswell, has run out of chances to get his shit together in America, so he's sent to live with his strict Navy father in Tokyo. Sean makes fast friends with Twinkie and soon takes a liking to Takeshi's girlfriend, Neela. So Sean challenges this Drift King to a race. Han is intrigued, and even lets the American use his Nissan Silvia. Unfortunately, Sean has no idea how to drift, so he totals the car in humiliating fashion. Now he owes Han a car, but Han agrees to teach Sean how to drift so he can knock Takeshi down a few notches. Takeshi's Yakuza uncle confronts his nephew about the family's business dealings. Turns out Han has been skimming from the top under Takeshi's nose. I mean, that's what happens when a former FBI top 10 wanted fugitive gets partnered with a high schooler, but whatever. Takeshi confronts Han and Sean and pulls a gun to make himself clear. Twinkie helps Han and Sean escape in a super cool chase through Tokyo, including an insanely reckless, high-speed drift through the world's busiest intersection. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Deckard Shaw enters the scene and crashes into Han, causing an extremely violent wreck. He calls Dom Toretto and suavely introduces himself. Dom notices a package from Japan on the doorstep and quickly alerts Mia, Brian, and baby Jack before it detonates, obliterating the house. Meanwhile, Han seemingly explodes, and Sean leaves the cross necklace, passed from Dom to Letty to Shaw, at the scene of the crime. Sean's devastated and knows Neela is in danger from a clearly abusive boyfriend, so he vows to set things right. He returns Takeshi's uncle's skim money and challenges the nephew to an honor race. Loser leaves town forever. The Yakuza thinks it's a delightful idea, and they're set to race down a ridiculous mountain pass requiring insane drifts to avoid a fiery death. Dozens of bystanders litter the road, recording the race on flip phones in 2014 for some reason. Sean keeps his cool head as Takeshi aggressively attempts to ram him off the road, eventually leading to the young gangster toppling off the mountain himself. Using a final drift to avoid the wreckage, Sean successfully saves Neela, proving to his father that he's not a total screw-up. Furious 7 continued, 2014. Brian's clearly freaked out by Shaw's Unabomber incident, so he puts his wife and child under tight FBI security. Dom pays a visit to Hobbs in the hospital to get intel on Shaw, and an unofficial blessing. Toretto heads to Japan and meets with the new Drift King, Sean Boswell. Sean returns the cross necklace to Dom, and Han's ashes are taken back to LA for a proper burial. But Shaw shows up at the funeral, so Dom doesn't hesitate to give chase. Isolated, Shaw baits Dom into a game of chicken, completely crushing Dom's 1970 Dodge Charger with a reinforced bumper. Things are looking grim, but a mysterious group of soldiers led by a Mr. Nobody forces Shaw to retreat. He recruits Dom and the crew to track down a hacker that'll lead them to a super surveillance tool known as God's Eye. It's capable of finding anybody's location on Earth almost instantaneously. If they can keep God's Eye away from terrorists, the crew will be allowed to use it to track down Shaw. The hacker, Ramsey, is in terrorist captivity, being transported through the Caucasus. Brian climbs aboard a bus to retrieve the young genius girl, transferring her safely to Dom before the movie turns into Jurassic Park: The Lost World for a bit. Dom evades Shaw and the terrorists by driving off a cliff, and Ramsey informs everybody that God's Eye is located in the United Arab Emirates. The gang tracks it to an Abu Dhabi prince's Lycan Hypersport, located high within a skyscraper. The movie turns into Goldfinger, again, as the team causes a diversion and thwarts the prince's UFC champion bodyguard before stealing the insanely fast car. They can't let that speed go to waste, so they crash it through 2 other skyscrapers during their getaway. Using God's Eye, Shaw gets quickly tracked down, but he's unexpectedly teamed up with a terrorist and re-steals God's Eye. The battle moves to the streets, and the crew uses Ramsey's elite hacking skills to retake God's Eye. Dom and Shaw finally duke it out with Dom's weapon of choice, wrenches. Dom beats him, proving that the streets always win, even against insane super agents. Also, Hobbs is sick of missing the action, so he flexes out of his cast to join the fight and commandeers a freaking minigun to save the day. Meanwhile, Dom tries to ram his car into the head terrorist helicopter, but misses and gets into a horrific wreck. Hobbs is slightly more level-headed, so he blows the helicopter up with bullets instead. Dom is resuscitated as Letty reveals all her memories have finally flooded back. Hobbs gleefully escorts Shaw to prison, and the rest of the gang heads to the Dominican Republic. As for Brian, he fully retires to domestic life with Mia, who's pregnant with their second child. No more missions for Brian O'Connor. The crew tearfully say goodbye to Brian, as we tearfully say goodbye to Paul. The Fate of the Furious, 2017. Dom and Letty finally get their honeymoon in Cuba, but Havana isn't romantic enough for these two without some street racing. Dom uses Cubanos to supercharge an ancient 1950 Chevrolet Fleetline, salvaging his cousin's ride and earning the respect of the local racers. A strange, sultry, shady woman named Cypher suddenly shows up and coerces Dom to work for her. This femme fatale is actually the mastermind who employed Owen Shaw in Furious 6 and hired the God's Eye terrorist in Furious 7. So basically, the movie turns into Spectre for a bit. Meanwhile, Hobbs is enjoying quality time coaching his daughter's soccer team when he's coerced to save the world once more. He needs to hijack a high-tech EMP from a military base in Berlin. Hobbs is totally reliant on Dom at this point, so he recruits the old crew and they successfully retrieve the EMP and elude local police. They're in the clear when Dom suddenly rams into Hobbs, stealing the EMP for Cypher and escaping. Dom has officially gone rogue. To make matters worse, he also steals God's Eye. What does Cypher have over Dom to force him to turn on his family? Well, it turns out she has super cop Elena hostage, along with Dom and Elena's illegitimate son. Meanwhile, Hobbs gets arrested for stealing from the German military and is taken to the same prison as Deckard Shaw. Mr. Nobody and his bumbling sidekick show up to help the two rivals escape, since they need all the muscle they can get to combat Cypher. Dom heads to the Big Apple to steal nuclear launch codes from the Russian Minister of Defense. He manages to secretly meet with the Shaw matriarch, Magdalene, as he starts to put together a way to escape his predicament. Hacking thousands of self-driving cars in Manhattan, Cypher rams half the city into the defense minister's car, allowing Dom to easily steal the nuclear football. The team gangs up on Dom, but he proves just how ridiculously overpowered the street racer has become in the last 16 years. They're simply no match, and Dom guns down Deckard in the streets. But that's part of the plan too, as Tego and Rico discreetly gather Deckard's body. Letty scoops up the codes, and Dom knows that he can't shoot the love of his life. But unfortunately, Cypher's other goon cuts Letty off. But Dom manages to save her. Cypher doesn't take too kindly to Dom's defiance, so she coldly executes Elena. Dom brings the EMP device to Russia to hijack a nuclear submarine, and Cypher's world-dominating plan is quickly coming together. But thankfully, Dom's plan is also fully in motion. Deckard's death was staged so that he could take himself off the grid and plan with Mom to infiltrate Cypher's jet alongside his little bro. The Shaws rescue Dom's son just in time for Dom to save his crew, gleefully beating down Elena's executioner. Hobbs manhandles a torpedo while Dom manipulates a heat-seeking missile into taking out the nuclear sub. Deckard, meanwhile, has a fun adventure with the baby Toretto, efficiently taking out the entirety of Cypher's personal forces. But Cypher manages to eject herself from the plane to hack another day in a future sequel. Hobbs refuses his badge back to spend quality time with his daughter, and the crew, no, the family, enjoys another barbecue. Dom finally reveals the name of his newfound son, Brian. Hobbs and Shaw, post-2017. The righteous agent Hobbs and anti-hero spy Shaw are perfect enemies, but they actually have a lot in common. They're both tracking down goons and clubs after hearing about some kind of super virus capable of annihilating the world's population. The virus, named Snowflake, is being collected by an MI6 team led by Deckard's sister, Hattie Shaw. Suddenly, they get ambushed by a cybernetically enhanced super soldier, Brixton Lore. Brixton has quite the history with the Shaws. Years ago, Deckard left him for dead before Brixton was revived by the eugenics-fueled organization Etion. Hattie manages to inject herself with the virus and evade Brixton, but he simply frames her for the biological weapon theft so that the world is hot on her trail instead of his. The CIA recruits both Hobbs and Shaw to catch Hattie before Brixton can, but these two are extremely reluctant to work with each other. Hobbs finds Hattie first, and they have a little bit of hand-to-hand foreplay before he brings her in. But Brixton blasts his way into CIA headquarters and kidnaps our infected damsel to get to the virus. Shaw and Hobbs try to stop him, but the superhuman can foresee all attacks and easily overcomes our duo. Fortunately, they cause enough of a distraction to get away with Hattie. They track down the actual developer of the snowflake virus, who informs Hattie that she has a mere couple of days before the virus becomes active in her system and dooms the world. They need to get to the Etienne base in Ukraine to acquire a device capable of extracting the virus. Too bad Brixton labeled Hobbs and Shaw as terrorists. They have to sneak their way from London to Moscow with secret identities, like Mike Oxmall. En route to Moscow, they gain an ally in the diminutive Air Marshal, Dinkley. One of Deckard's former flings gets the trio into the Etienne complex, but Hobbs and Shaw get ambushed and tortured by Brixton. Hattie and the snowflake developer save the day before the final shot can be delivered, letting our trio escape with a damaged version of the extraction device. They use Dinkley to get a charter to Hobbs' childhood home in Samoa, to repair the device, and to host the final showdown with Etienne on friendly turf. It's been a couple of decades, so Hobbs' brother Jonah isn't exactly excited to see him. At least Mama welcomes her baby boy back with open arms, but she doesn't welcome his guns. She destroys all of the evil firearms, forcing them to fight the Mecha Man with the family heirlooms. While the virus extraction device begins to work its magic, Etienne launches their assault. The Samoans put up a damn good fight, but Brixton scoops up a virally weakened Hattie in the chaos. So Hobbs and Shaw pursue his helicopter in one final epic car chase. As the final bits of virus are extracted from Hattie, Hobbs and Shaw fully put their differences aside to engage in fisticuffs with the superhuman. By attacking Brixton simultaneously, they can confuse and fry his defensive programming. Etienne's director, knowing their tool is now obsolete, decommissions Brixton and shuts him down remotely. The ominous director then boasts to Hobbs that their past is connected, guaranteeing that they'd meet again. Maybe we'll get some questions answered in Fast and Furious 9. With Etienne and Cypher both still at large, there are still plenty of loose ends left open in this constantly expanding series, especially with Han confirmed to still be alive. What's your favorite of the franchise? I'm a Fast 5 guy, but let me know your opinion in the comments.